A very good morning to all the participants and our distinguished speaker. I am Meenal Jadhav and on behalf of SEF CRNTS IIT Bombay, I take this opportunity to welcome you all for today's talk on NMR, which titled Structure Determination of Peptide by Simple 2D NMR Spectroscopy, which will be presented by Dr. Nutan Agadi. Before I proceed, I would like to give you a brief overview of SEF IIT Bombay. SEF IIT Bombay was inaugurated by our late ex-Prime Minister Shri Morarji Desai in the year 1976. TST has set up SEF in various parts of the country with an objective of providing guidance for data acquisition using sophisticated analytical instruments. SEF was established at IIT Bombay in the year 1976 with the DST support. Center for Research in Nanotechnology and Science, popularly known as CRNTS, was established at IIT Bombay in the year 2006. In the year 2008, both SEF and CRNTS were merged and came under one umbrella, which is led by one in charge. Currently, Professor Anil Kotantrial is the head of the department. We have 16 major equipment under SEF and 5 major equipment under CRNTS. SEF IIT Bombay provides measurement services to the researchers at IIT Bombay as well as to the users from various academic institutes, national laboratories and industries. CRNTS also has an academic wing in which we have got almost more than 65 associated faculty members and 80 PhD students. In the financial year 2019-2020, we have got almost 2,700 users and we have analyzed more than 25,000 samples. Current slide shows the 16 instruments which are housed at SEF IIT Bombay, which are funded by the DST, of which NMR 600 is the topic of our talk today. We have upcoming dual beam FIB FEG SEM, which is under installation. These are the 5 instruments which are housed at SEF IIT Bombay, which are funded by the institute. This is NMR lab at SEF IIT Bombay, and this is NMR 600 MHz spectrometer. Dr. Nutan Agadi is the in charge. This instrument is equipped with a multinuclear solution state probe with variable temperature accessories and a 3.2 mm solid state probe. To get more detailed information about SEF IIT Bombay, you can visit us at sef.iitb.ac.in, wherein you can find the information about all the instruments housed at SEF IIT Bombay and also the procedures to avail these facilities. We get samples from all over India as well as from our neighboring country, Nepal. We encourage our users from various academic institutes, national laboratories and industries to visit our facility. We also have a YouTube channel wherein you can get the videos of our previous webinars. You can also join us on LinkedIn, where you can get the latest updates regarding the instruments, webinars, or any upcoming event held at SEF IIT Bombay. This is the brochure for ongoing webinar series, the information for which is listed on our SEF website as well as on the LinkedIn page. All the instruments at SEF IIT Bombay are managed and operated by our dedicated staff. We will be very happy to help you with the analysis. Now I introduce to you our today's speaker, Dr. Nutan Agadi. Dr. Nutan Agadi is currently working as Assistant Technical Officer in SEF CRNTS, IIT Bombay. She had done her PhD in structural biology from IIT Bombay and has 3 protein structures deposited in the protein data bank. Dr. Nutan Agadi has been working in IIT Bombay for past 25 years and is in charge of NMR spectrometer at SEF IIT Bombay. She has worked on all the 3 makes of NMR instruments like Varian, Geol and Bruker. She is well known for her expertise in the generating the best quality spectrum even from the worst quality sample. She has vast knowledge about the multinuclear NMR as well. We are sure that this talk will enlighten the knowledge of the researchers to use NMR for their research purpose. Before I take your leave, just an important note. Queries related to today's talk should be posted in the question and answer box only. Question with the participant's name only will be answered. We will be posting the feedback form, kindly fill it. It will help us to improvise. So let us commence today's talk. Over to you, Dr. Nutan.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Meena. So without taking too much of time, I'll directly start with my presentation. So the contents of the webinar are some of the candidates who have registered have asked for to start with the initial brief introduction and basic principles of NMR. So I have included a brief introduction to NMR, basic principles and instrumentation. Very briefly, I'll be talking about the applications and the types of NMR experiments before I go into the main topic, that is structure determination. Okay, so this will help people who are relatively new to NMR. They will be able to understand and appreciate what I'll be talking in my later presentation today. Okay, so nuclear magnetic resonance, what is it? So as the name itself suggests, there are nuclei involved, there is magnet involved, and there is resonance. Okay, so NMR is nothing but it's a characterization method which uses nuclear spins to probe the structure and dynamics of a molecule. So here we are using a superconducting magnet to manipulate the nuclear spin so that they can talk to each other and give us information. So not all nuclei are observable in a NMR. Only those nuclei which have spin, okay, that is any charged particle which has a spin acts like a tiny bar magnet. So only those nuclei which have spin can be observed in NMR. So what are those nuclei? Here are some examples, like proton, that is 1H, 27 aluminium, carbon 13, N15, deuterium. We have so many others like phosphorus 31, F19, vanadium 51, which have a spin. Okay, so yeah. So any nuclei which has an odd mass number or an odd atomic number, okay, if they have at least one of them, the mass number or the atomic number is odd, then they will have a spin, and only those nuclei which have spin are NMR active. Nuclei like carbon 12, which has both atomic mass number and the atomic number even, will have a spin equal to 0, and such type of nuclei are not NMR active. So you cannot observe carbon 12. When you say a carbon NMR, we are always observing carbon 13 nuclei. Okay. So what is the basic principle of NMR? When you take nuclei that is in a sample tube and immerse them in an external magnetic field like here, okay, the nuclear spins will align either with the magnetic field or against the magnetic field. Okay, now these two, in this situation, when you expose them to a second oscillating magnetic field in the form of an RF radio frequency, these nuclei which are in the ground state will flip to an excited state, and these two different energy levels will be separated by energy equal to delta E. Now this delta E will be directly proportional to the effective magnetic field. That is, it depends on two factors. One is the magnetic field strength, and the second is the chemical environment of the nucleus. So let me give you an example. So if I have three samples or three molecules like this, all three of them, if you see, they have methyl groups. Okay, but the chemical environment of this methyl group, the chemical environment of this and the chemical environment of this is different, because this is attached to a methylene group, this is attached to a phenyl group, and this is attached to an electronegative atom. So the delta E for this one and this one will be different, and that is why in an NMR spectrum they will come at different positions. So that is what I mean when I say the chemical environment of the nucleus. Okay. So what type of information you get from NMR? Now the number of peaks in a simple 1D NMR like this will give you the number of species of that nuclei. For example, here you have toluene, which has a methyl protons and the phenyl protons. So there are two types of protons. So in this spectrum, if you see for toluene, you have two peaks. Okay, one is the phenyl proton peak, and one is a methyl proton. In the second example, that is ethyl benzene, you have three protons, CH3, CH2 protons, and the phenyl protons. So you have three types of protons, and here you have three peaks. The third example that is propyl benzene, has four types of protons, one phenyl, two methylene. These two methylenes are different because this one is attached to a methyl group on one side and a methylene group on one side, whereas this methylene is again different from this because it is attached to an ethyl group on one side and a phenyl group on the other side. And then you have this methyl group. So there are four types of protons. So you have four peaks here. Okay. Now further, the position of the peaks will also tell you the nature of the proton, whether it's an aliphatic or aromatic, like in this one. This is the aliphatic coming at around 2 ppm and the aromatic coming around 7 ppm. And it also tells us about the surrounding of its atoms. For example, if you see here, the methyl group here is attached to a phenyl group, and this methyl peak is coming at around 2.5 ppm. Whereas this methyl group, which is attached to a CH2 group now here. So here this methyl group is coming here at 1.1 or 1.2 ppm. Okay. So it tells us about the identity of the surroundings. If the methyl was attached to a benzene ring, it's surely going to come around 2.3 or 2.5 ppm. Okay. So then, yeah. So further, the intensity of the peak is directly proportional to the number of nuclei of that type. Okay, so when I say intensity, it is the area under the peak, which is shown here in red. So now if you see, this is the molecule, and this is the 1D spectrum for this molecule, which has ethyl, the phenyl group, the CH2 group, and the CH3 group. The protons, the ratio of the protons is 5:2:3. So the area, when you integrate these peaks, the area under the peaks will be proportional to 5:2:3. So this is what I mean by saying that intensity of the peak is proportional to the number of nuclei of that type. Further, the splitting of the peaks. If you see the fine structure of these peaks, this peak is a triplet, this peak is a quartet, and this is a multiplet as shown here. So these peaks give information about the neighboring nuclei. For example, if the methyl group is next to a CH2 group, there are two neighboring protons. So this peak will split into a triplet, n+1, where n is the number of neighboring protons. Further, this CH2 group, which is next to a CH3 group here, n is equal to 3 now. So this one will split into 3+1, that is a quartet. Similarly here, because of the ortho, meta, and para position coupling, they are almost similar but not exactly similar. So they couple to each other and you get a multiplet like this. Okay. So this is about the information. Very quickly, I'll just talk about the broad applications of NMR. Chemists use NMR for studying reaction processes and chemical analysis for identification of chemicals and structures of molecules. Structural biologists like us, we use it for determination of tertiary structures and to study the dynamics of biomolecules. Pharmaceutical companies heavily use NMR for drug screening, drug design, and for identifying drug leads, and to also identify if there are any impurities in their samples. Clinical microbiologists use for metabolite and biofluid analysis. For example, a very interesting example is like you can determine, you can do a proton NMR of a pus sample and use it for a rapid bacterial identification and diagnose the disease that the infected person is having. Okay, so now depending on the application, different types of NMR experiments need to be performed. So broadly, there are three types of experiments. Very broad classification is the one-dimensional experiment. This is generally used for small molecules where you get peaks, very well resolved peaks, and you can get all the information by you can assign the peaks to the respective groups in your molecule. So this is okay if 1D NMR is okay, you get all the information required for a small molecule. However, now if your 1D spectrum is like this, then what would you do? For large proteins, there are thousands of protons. So you have all the peaks overlapped to each other and then overlapped with each other, and then it will be difficult for you to assign. So in such a case, then you have to go in for a two-dimensional experiment. So here in two-dimensional experiment, you have two dimensions on this in the X and the Y dimension. So now in one dimension, you have protons peaks spread out like this. In two dimension, now this proton spread is again spread out in the second dimension. So you get a proper dispersion and you get information. So this is how the 2D NMR is represented. Now, what if the 2D spectrum is also very complicated for very large proteins? Then even your 2D will not be sufficient to resolve all the protons. So in such a case, then you have to go for a 3D experiment. So in 3D experiment, what we do is there are 2D planes stacked on each other. Okay, so here if you see, you have three planes. So in this plane, you have proton chemical shift information on one dimension, C13 chemical shift on the second dimension. The other plane now here, in this plane, you get proton chemical shift on this dimension and the nitrogen chemical shift on this dimension. Similarly, in the third dimension here, you have nitrogen and the carbon-13 information. Okay. So this is how generally a 3D spectrum is presented. Now this slide will show you a number of different types of experiments that in NMR. In NMR, we have very fancy names for all the different experiments, and all these are actually acronyms for different experiments in NMR, and these give different types of information. Okay, so many of you must have heard of APT, DEPT, COSY and all. Okay, so or NOSY and all. Apart from that, very advanced experiments like DRAMA, BIRD, there are very fancy names. Okay, so these are just different names. Very few of the experiments I've just put here, names of very few experiments that are present in NMR, that can be done in NMR. So today in today's topic, I'll be mainly focusing on NOESY, TOXY, and HSQC, which is used for structure determination of a small peptide. Okay. So let me start now with the main topic, that is structure determination of a small peptide by simple 2D NMR experiment. So this process involves basically 6 steps. Sample preparation. Once you prepare the sample, you collect the data, that is you perform all your NMR experiments, analyze your data. Once you analyze your data, you will be able to get all the structural information that you need, and then do a structure calculation by using this generated NMR data. And then once you get the structure, you have to see whether your structure is of a good quality or no. So you need to validate your structure. Okay. So let us begin with the first step, sample preparation. Now, sample preparation is the first and the most important step, because if you don't prepare your sample properly, for example, proteins and peptides, you either need to express them in bacteria or you need to do a solid phase protein synthesis. So whatever it is, you need to have a very pure sample. No impurities are allowed. If you have any impurities, then your spectrum will be very difficult to analyze. So always see that your sample is pure. That is, there should be only one single compound. Next is solubility. Your sample prepared should be soluble in a proper solvent, appropriate solvent, and it should be clear. No turbidity or no suspended particles. Like as you can see here, it should be completely soluble. Any suspended particles or turbidity can reduce the quality of your spectra, which will make it difficult for you to assign the peaks. Then the third and the fourth one, concentration and volume. These are also important, because generally when you express proteins, you may not get a good yield. Okay, so this is important. Concentration for a simple small peptide, if it's of natural abundance, that is if you have not labeled your peptide with carbon 13 and N15, if it's natural abundance, then a decent concentration would be around 1 millimolar of the peptide dissolved in 0.6 ml or at least 0.5 ml of the suitable solvent. If, for example, for some reason you're not able to do it, you're not able to have this 0.6 or 0.5 ml of the sample of 1 millimolar, you can reduce the volume, concentrate it by reducing the volume, and use a 3 mm tube instead of a 5 mm tube. Okay, so that's about sample preparation. Next, once you have prepared the sample, you need to collect the data. That is, you need to perform the required experiments to generate the structural restraints. Now, for determining the structure, you need basically the basic two structural restraints, that are the dihedral angles, that is phi psi angles, and the distance restraints. Now, for a small peptide, okay, when I say a small peptide, it could be anywhere between 5 to 30 or 35 amino acid residues. So for such a small peptide, you need these 4 experiments, that is TOXY, NOESY, 15N-HSQC and 13C HSQC. Now, TOXY and NOESY are proton correlation experiments. One is through bond and the other one is through space. I'll be talking about both these experiments a little bit in detail in the further slides. So TOXY helps in identifying the unique protons in a peptide molecule, and NOESY helps in determining the distances between two protons in a molecule. So most of the structural information is present in NOESY experiment. That is, you are getting distances between 2 protons. That is, through space, you are able to get information about the protons present in space. Further, the HSQCs, 15N and 13C HSQCs, help in assigning the TOXY peaks, and also the chemical shifts of nitrogen and carbon are used for prediction of the dihedral angles. Okay. So what is now coming to, I said proton, both these are proton-proton correlation, and one is through bond and the other one is through space correlation. Okay, so here I just very quickly I'll tell you the difference between NOESY and TOXY. So TOXY will give you only through bond correlation. That is, the magnetization is transferred through bond. If you're going to get a correlation from this proton and this proton, okay, the magnetization is transferred like this. Or if it's a correlation from this NH to the side chain alpha and beta, it is through bond. Whereas in case of NOESY, if the transfer is through space, that is, it doesn't go through bond, it goes through space. So if there are any 2 protons which are less than 5 or 6 angstroms apart, then you will be able to see a nosy peak for them. But if they are very far, then you may not be able to see. For example, here I have shown a polypeptide chain. Okay, so here if you see, these are 2 amino acid residues or 2 protons. Now you can say here in the sequence they are very far, but because of the folding of the peptide, they are coming close to each other, and if this distance is less than 6 angstroms, you will be able to see a peak in your nosy spectrum. Similarly, this is another example. But if your proton is one is here and one is here, you may not be able to see a nosy peak because this is less more than 6 angstroms apart. Okay, so these are the 2 representative toxi spectrums for a particular peptide. Okay, now the information that you get in nosy and toxi is that in nosy you get all the peaks that are present in toxi, plus you get additional peaks because of the dipolar or through space coupling. For example, in a nosy, in a toxi peak, you don't get correlation between the amide protons, which are amino acid residues, neighboring amino acid residues. But in nosy, you can get the amide correlation because of the dipolar coupling here. Even here you can see extra peaks, but here you can see very clearly. Here there are no peaks in the amide region, but here now in here you can see the amide correlations. Okay. Coming to 59HSQC, 59HSQC gives a correlation between nitrogen and proton. So if you see in a polypeptide or in a protein chain, okay, a peptide, there are different amino acids which are bonded by, which are connected to each other by the peptide bond. So each amino acid has a NH group, right? So these in 59HSQC, each peak represents one NH bond. So by just counting the number of peaks, you can get the number of residues in your protein backbone. Of course, there are certain amino acids which have nitrogen NH in their side chains. So those come at a different position. They come slightly upfield here. Okay. So, but in this region, you can just count the number of peaks and tell, apart from proline, you get peaks for all the amino acid residues minus the first one. Okay. 13C-HSQC will give you information about any carbons which is bonded to a proton. Okay, if there is any proton connected to a carbon, then it will give a peak here. For example, this is a CH alpha carbon, this is the beta carbon, this is the gamma carbon, and for longer side chains like isoleucine or arginine and all, you have delta and all that stuff. So here, this is a spectrum of 13C-HSQC. This region which I have marked here shows the C alpha region. This is the C beta region. This is the C gamma and the C delta region. And for example, if you have aromatic peaks like here, you see them in much more downfield, that is between 6.5 to 7.5 ppm in the proton dimension, and between 110 to 135, 140 in the carbon dimension. Okay. So this information you get from HSQC. So once you have collected all these 4 experiments, now what are you going to do with these spectra? You need to analyze the data. That is, you need to assign each of these peaks. There are hundreds of peaks. Okay, so you have to assign each of these peaks to a particular proton pair. Now for this, this is the 3rd step, and this is the most important step, and this is the most time consuming step in structure determination, and it requires a lot of skill. So the 3rd step, that is assignment of peak or data analysis, will require a software called CCP-NMR software suite. In that, there is a software called analysis. So analysis is a software which can be used for the spectrum display, interactive analysis, and assignment. So this is the output, or this is the window of a CCP-NMR where you can display your spectrum. Okay, you can display any number of spectra, and you can overlap one on top of the other. So here you can see there are 2 spectra overlapped on one on top of the other. And then you can assign we can pick each peak, assign each peak to a particular proton pair or a proton nitrogen or proton carbon pair, depending on what experiment it is. Okay. So this analysis software helps you in picking the peaks, that is selecting each peak, assigning each peak to its proton pair, the chemical list, of the chemical shift for all the atoms. Okay, so here you can see this is the atom pair, that is leucine H, leucine N. This is a 15N-HSQC data. So here in the F1 dimension you get the proton chemical shift 8.8. In the F2 dimension you get the nitrogen chemical shift 121.02. Okay, so you can generate the list of the chemical shift for all the atoms like this after you assign all the spectra, after you assign all the peaks. Okay, then once you assign all the peaks in the NOESY spectrum, you can measure the intensity of the peaks, and from the intensity you can convert the intensity to distance, and this is what we need for structural elucidation. And from the chemical shift data we can predict the dihedral angles, which is also another structural restraint. Okay, so now let me come to how to assign each peak in the NMR spectrum, in the TOXI spectrum. Now the TOXI spectrum, this is called the amide region or the fingerprint region. Okay, so this this pattern will be different for different amino acids. However, it's not as easy as you see and say like this. So each, if I expand this part, it looks something like this. So if you have seen this vertical lines, each spin system is present in this. Sorry, my drawing is a little bad. So on each vertical line you can see one spin system. Okay, so in this line you can see that it's 4 arginine. On this line I have assigned it for 9 lysine. Okay, so like this, each of the 20 amino acids have a fingerprint TOXI pattern. Okay, so using this knowledge as well as another knowledge, that is you get it from the Biological Magnetic Research Data Bank, that is BMRB. In BMRB, this is the site. So if you go to this site, you get the chemical shifts for all the atoms of all the 20 amino acid residues. Okay, so you have to take support from this site and plus your knowledge about the TOXI patterns. Okay, and then you have to start the assignment. So if you go to this site and then click on NMR statistics, you get this page. Now here in this page, you have the chemical shift statistics here, 20 for the 20 common amino acid residues. If you click on show, it will give you this page. So here I'm just showing you a part of this. So here all the 20 amino acids are present. Now this is showing only 2 of the amino acids. So starting with alanine, here this box shows all the atom names that are present in alanine, that is all the hydrogen, the protons, the carbons and nitrogen and all. Okay, and then you don't have to really worry about this. You see this average shift. Okay, so this one, these 3 are for the amide proton, alpha proton and the beta proton. 177 is for carbonyl carbon, but here in this experiments, whatever I'm going to talk, we do not get carbonyl carbons, so I'm not talking about that. And these are the carbon alpha, carbon beta, beta carbon, alpha carbon and the nitrogen chemical shift. So you have to take help of this data, and for arginine, since it has a long side chain, there are a lot of atoms, so you have all these chemical shift values here. So using this data, you can start with the assignment. This data will basically help you to understand where approximately you are going to get your, where approximately you will be able to see your peak. For example, H alpha, I'm sorry, the H beta of alanine is 1.3 here. Okay, so if you're assigning some peak in your spectra, say at 2 ppm and saying that it is H beta of alanine, the software will immediately tell that there could be a mistake, that H beta of alanine does not come at 2 ppm. So you have to see this and then accordingly assign the spectrum. So let me just very quickly tell you how to assign the TOXI spectrum. So if you see, I've just taken one example of an amino acid, valine, simple amino acid. Now, if you see in TOXI, you're going to get correlation of this NH with the H alpha, this NH with H beta, and this NH with the H gamma carbon atoms. So now in a TOXI spectrum, if I see here the NH group, I said this has a correlation with this H alpha. If you go upwards in this N dimension, nitrogen amide dimension, you can see a peak which corresponds to the H alpha. Similarly, you can see from NH again to the H beta. And then these two carbon gamma carbons, you have correlation here like this and this. So these two carbon gamma carbon protons may be slightly different, or so here it is shown very much separately because just for your It's a schematic representation, but practically you may be able to see them very, very close. If you see the chemical shift 0.94, 0.97, they're slightly different. That's one. So you may be able to see them separately or almost overlap with each other. So this is the type of information. Now, similarly for arginine, if you take, I said it has a very long side chain, so you get a very long spin system like this for arginine. Okay, so here again NH alpha, NH, you get correlation like this, beta, gamma, delta, and then epsilon. Okay, so now if you go on this in this vertical dimension, you have a NH amide proton with a epsilon one, that is this one. Then amide with alpha, that is this correlation. Similarly with the delta, with beta, and then with gamma. Okay, so now further, not only with NH, you have correlation of this H alpha with CH2, that is beta protons, gamma protons, delta, and your epsilon. Okay. So now, if I see here, this one is the alpha proton. So this is having correlation with your delta, with beta, with gamma, and with also with the same thing what we have seen earlier. Okay, with NH and your epsilon NH. Similarly, now if you go with the beta, starting from beta, this will have correlation with gamma. Okay, so here if you see, these are the two beta protons. So it has correlation with gamma. It has correlation with alpha, that is this one. Okay, it has correlation with epsilon NH. It has correlation with the amide protons. So this is how you go on assigning each of your peak in your toxic spectrum. Now, once you have your toxic spectrum assigned, you can just overlap the nosy and the toxic spectrum, like, and the fingerprint region, if you see, it will look like something like this. The black one represents the toxic and the green is the nosy spectrum. Okay, now if I expand this region, the amide and the H alpha region, okay, I'll get something like this. Now this is used for a sequence walk, that is sequentially you can assign all your protons in the peptide. Okay, so this is called the sequence walk method. So how this is a very important step in assignment, and using this simultaneously with your toxi, you can assign all your nosy peaks. Okay. So a main focus here is to assign all the nosy peaks. So if you assign all the nosy peaks, that will include both the toxi peaks as well. So you get all the chemical shift data as well as the distance data. Okay, so let me tell you what is the sequence walk. If I take a small stretch of the peptide, okay, let me I've just expanded it, this center part, okay, from A, B, K. Okay, now if I have this region of the toxi nosy spectra, overlap spectra, okay, let me start with, say I have identified in the toxi, I have identified this valine. Okay, so now this valine is coming from, that is, I'm just writing the 18, that is, I don't write valine here now, right now. Okay, so this peak I've assigned it to 18HN, that is amide proton and H alpha proton. What does that mean? It means that it is showing a correlation of this valine, okay, NH amide proton to your H alpha. Okay, that is this proton. However, now even in nosy, you will be able to get this correlation. Now in toxi, you get this information through bond, but in nosy, since they are close to each other, you can see that peak even in the nosy spectrum. Okay, the same correlation. So here you can see there is a black peak, black contour as well as a green contour. So it means that the black is coming from toxic spectrum, the green is your nosy spectrum. So if it is a self peak, that is from the same amino acid or from the same spin system, you get the green and the black peaks together. Okay, now if you come back here to this NH, now this NH is also close to the H alpha of the previous amino acid, that is I minus 1. If I refer this to as I, then the I minus 1 amino acid, the H alpha is also close, that is, it is less than 5 angstroms. So in nosy, you will be able to see this correlation. Okay, but this correlation cannot be seen in toxi because there is no proton here. Okay, so in toxi you can see only only the intra-residual couplings and not inter-residual residual coupling. So in nosy, you can see this peak as well as this peak. That is for one amide proton, you have two correlations. Okay, so now when I come to this one, this is the amide chemical shift that is coming at 7.8 or 7.9. Okay, so this amide proton will have two correlation. One is itself, that is with 18 itself, and on the same amino acid, on the same vertical dimension, if you see, you have sorry, you have one peak which can be seen only in the nosy peak, or only in the nosy spectrum. Okay, so here you can see. So from 18 you are coming here, and this I will assign it as 18 amide proton, that is, and correlating with the previous, that is I-1 17 H alpha, that is this one. Okay, so it is this correlation. Similarly, now when you focus now on this one, okay, CH alpha, that is this dimension. Now if you see this dimension is the H alpha dimension, that is around 4 ppm dimension. Okay, now in the horizontal one, this one has correlation with this, which we have seen here. However, it also has a correlation with this, its own amide. Okay, so this correlation can be seen in toxy because it is through bond, as well as it can be seen in nosy. Okay, so now if you see here in this dimension, you get one peak here which has both green and black, that is toxy and nosy peak. Okay, so I assign this to 17HN and 17HA. So from this, again, if you go on walking backwards, this is called sequence walk. One I, you see assign I, then you see I-1, then next I-2. So this is how it goes. So let me just show you how it happens here. So from 18 self, we are going to 18 I-1, that 18 17. Okay, then from 18 17 we go to, we find 17 17, that is self peak. Then again in the vertical dimension, you go from 17 to 17 16. Okay, 17 HN amide proton and 16 H alpha proton. Then you go from horizontal, you get 16 self peak. Again you go vertical, you get 15, 16 15 nosy peak. Then again go here, you will get the self peak, that is from 15. So from 15 again here, if you can, when you analyze, you will see that there are many times there are overlapped peaks. So you can make out that there are overlapped peaks. So here you have 15 14, then 14 14, 14 13. So this goes on like this. So this is called a sequence walk. So this is how you will be able to assign all your peaks. So once you assign all this, the rest of the spectra, you'll be able to assign them very easily. So this is how now a part of the nosy assigned spectrum looks like. So you have all so many peaks, and each of the peak has been assigned to a pair like this. Okay, so now let us take one example. Okay, I think I have removed that. Okay, so this is how the nosy spectrum looks like. Coming to the, now we have analyzed, once you have analyzed all the nosy peaks and toxy peaks, HSQC peaks, now your life becomes a little more simpler. So the fourth step is the restraint generation. So restraint generation is that you have to get your torsion angles or the dihedral angles, which can be obtained from the chemical shift data from your toxy spectrums, and then you can generate your proton-proton distances from the intensity of the nosy peaks. So let us see how you can predict the backbone torsion angles or the dihedral angles. Okay, so we can use, there are two ways. One is you can use an online Talos Plus server, which helps you to predict this is the software which helps in predicting the protein phi-psi backbone torsion angles using all these chemical shift values. Okay, so even if you don't have one or two, if you are not able to assign the carbonyl, it doesn't really matter. You still get a fairly good dihedral angle restraints. So either you can use that, or even in the CCP NMR, you have the CCP NMR software, analysis software, also is equipped with predicting the backbone angles. So this is the data, this is chemical shift data that we generate from the toxy peak. So here you can see this is the chemical shift values for, this is the second arginine residue, all the proton atoms. Then here you have threonine, the third residue, all the carbons, whatever we were able to assign, okay, protons and carbons. Then this is the fourth cysteine residue, fifth again arginine residue. So using all that chemical shift data, you can generate the phi psi angles. This is from the CCP-NMR software. This is an output from the CCP-NMR software. So you get the phi psi angles. Okay. So now we have generated the dihedral angle restraints. Now we need to do the intensity. We have to convert the intensities. We have to measure the intensities from the nosy peaks and then convert them into distances. So each cross peak in a nosy spectrum represents a pair of protons. For example, you can see here. So any proton pair which is less than 6 angstroms, you will be able to see a peak in the nosy spectrum. So your now we have talked about how each peak in the nosy spectrum has been assigned. Once you do the assignment, you need to measure the proton-proton distances from the peak intensities. So how you will do that? So we all must be knowing, or you must be knowing, that the NOE signal intensity is inversely proportional to the 6th root of distance r, that between the two nuclei. Okay. So this is the formula. The CCP-NMR also uses this formula to generate that. So it first calculates the volume of the peak and then converts it into distance. Okay. So this is a part of the nosy spectrum. Now, if you can see here, not all the peaks are of the same intensity. Okay. If you see this peak, it is quite intense, and when we generate the distance, it shows it is 2.7 angstroms. Okay. For example, here, if you can see this one, it is quite close, 2.7 angstrom. Next, if you see this one, it is less intense than this, and here it has been, it says that this proton pair is around 4 angstroms. 4 angstroms. Okay. Similarly, if you see, this is a very weak peak. Okay, so by just seeing this peak, you can make out that these proton pairs are away from each other, a little more apart from each other. Okay, so this is how you generate the distances from the nosy peak intensities, and then, so yeah, the greater the peak intensity, closer the proton pair. So once you have generated, now up till now, what all we have done is we have completed the sample preparation. We have performed all the required experiments. We have assigned the nosy and the toxy peaks, and from these two, we have got the torsion angles. We have got the distance restraints. What needs to be done is now we need to use these distance restraints, or structural restraints as they are called, for simulated annealing. Okay, simulated annealing is a structure calculation. For that, you need a SINA software or an Explore NIH. These are structure calculation softwares. So you need to put these experimental restraints and subject it to simulated annealing. I'll talk about it a little later. Do iterative structure calculation to arrive at an ensemble of the lowest energy structure. So initially you may see some violations in the assignments. So you need to recheck the assignments, correct them if needed, rerun the structure calculation until you get a good structure. Once you get a good structure, you need to perform a structure validation, and if you are satisfied with the structure, then you can deposit the structure in the protein data bank. So let us see what the structure calculation and validation are. Okay, so as I said, structure calculation needs software called either SINA or Explore NIH. Okay, now we know the sequence of the peptide, so we can generate the template structure, that is the primary structure, with inputs like the sequence, atom names. You know the sequence, so you'll have the atom names. For example, if this is your fully extended polypeptide chain, you have the bond lengths and the bond angles, etc. All the stereochemical parameters, which are already a feature of the software, structure software. So these are standard stereochemical parameters. So this will have information about the CN bond length, the NH bond length, or C carbonyl bond length and bond angles and all that. So this you don't need to give an input for this one. This is already present. Only you need to give the sequence and then generate a polypeptide chain. So it's like a string of beads. Okay, so once you generate this, now you use this data and subject it to simulated annealing using all the experimental inputs, whatever inputs, experimental data you have generated from NMR, torsion angles, and the restraints, distance restraints. Okay. So then, after simulated annealing, you can calculate the structure and you can get the structure like this. But of course, it is not as simple as I have shown here. So this calculation involves satisfying all the structural restraints using simulated annealing. Now, what is simulated annealing? Simulated annealing is you first heat the polypeptide chain, the starting structure that I showed, the primary structure. You heat it to a high temperature so that it is completely free coil, okay, random coil, and then you subject it to controlled cooling, and during that controlled cooling you use all your experimental inputs, okay, all your and you try to arrive at the lowest energy, and the lowest energy structure will be your final confirmation. So your main aim is to get the lowest energy structure. Okay, so this happens in simulated annealing. Okay, so now for running the SINA software for structure calculation, you need to run the SINA script, which requires these four files. That is the sequence file, prot file, which is gives the atom names with chemical shifts, which I showed you earlier. The .aco file, that is, it gives you the dihedral angle data, the phi and psi angles, and the .peaks, that is the distance restraints in terms of angstroms. So all these four files you can generate in the CCP-NMR software itself. And then you run the script to generate the structure file, that is the .pdb file, and the structure statistics. It also gives you the structure statistics. So once you get the PDB file, you can see your structure using PyMol or VMD software to visualize the structure. Okay, but before even you visualize the structure, what you have to concentrate on is the structure statistic file. How good your structure is, or is all your assignment okay? So here I've just shown you how the structure statistics file looks like. Okay, this is a SINA output after run number 5, for example. Okay, I said you have to do a number of runs, and each time you have to try correcting your wrong assignments and all that stuff. Okay. So this is how the structure statistic file looks. Okay, now what do you have to focus on this? It looks very complicated, but there are only 3 things that you need to focus on. Okay, so one is the target function. Okay, this target function, it will tell you about the energy of your confirmation. So lower the target function, better is your structure confirmation. Okay, so in the first run you may not get like this. It may be more than 200, 300, 400, whatever. Okay, but if you get a target function in your first run, if it is less than 200, you can be a little relaxed. It means that you're going on a right path. But if your target function in the first run shoots or starts at 400, 500, then there is something really wrong with your assignments. So once you do this, you first focus on your target function, how much it is, and then next is you see the constraints violated in 3 or more structures. Okay. So here, if you can see the pink one, this is the distance violations. When I say distance violations, for example, if you notice here, arginine 7, this is the delta proton of arginine 7, which has a correlation with beta proton of cysteine, that is the 31st cysteine residue. I have in my distance restraint file, I had said that this 2 protons are 3.65 angstroms apart. Okay, but now when it calculates the structure, it is not able to come to that particular distance, that is 3.65 angstroms. So in 4 structures, it is showing violation. And what is the maximum violation it has showed is 0.57 angstroms. And that 0.7 is in the 10th structure. This is the number of structures it is showing violation. The star represents the structure where there is maximum violation. Now, what does this actually mean? I have said that this arginine 7 delta proton and the cysteine 31 beta proton are 3.6 angstroms apart. But now there is when you calculate the structure, the derived structure is not showing 3.65. There is a violation there and maximum violation is 0.57 angstroms. So instead of 3.65 angstroms, if this is 3.65 angstroms, it's not able to come this close. It is a little apart. So that violation it is showing. Okay. Similarly, you can see that for tyrosine 17 epsilon and the 13 H alpha of the glycine 19th residue, there is a violation and the maximum is just 0.25. So you really don't have to worry. So, but whatever violations you can see here, if they're very less, then you can relax these. So I can go back to my distance file, okay, where I have all these distance data, and instead of 3.65, I can change this value to say 4 angstroms. So you are allowing it to a little more freedom of movement. Okay, and then you relax it a little, make this 4, and this you can make 5.1 or something. This is 4.2 angstroms. So this you can make 5.3 or 5.4, and then again rerun the structure. Okay, and then again see your structure if there are any violations. However, if your maximum violation is very high, say for example, if this one was 5 angstroms, it's violating by 5 angstroms, then it means that there's definitely something wrong in your assignment. Whatever you have assigned here is not correct. So you have to go back to your spectrum, re-look into the assignment, whether there are any other possibilities. You might have assigned it wrongly. So you have to correct your assignments and then rerun the structure. Next is the van der Waals. This is not an input file. This is generated because of steric hindrance. Okay, so it shows that there is a steric. It cannot come closer than this one. Okay, but this is not our input file, so we cannot really do anything about this. But that will be taken care of once you take care of these distance violations, and the third, that is the angle violations. So here you can see FISA angle. These are also our input data, right? So this again here, if you see here, it is maximum violation is by 17. So there could be some mistake in this one, or you can try relaxing it. This is your it is say for example, if you take here 9 degrees. Okay, this is a angle, so it will be in degrees. So for this is serine 8 phi angle is having a range from 40 to 70, and the maximum violation is around 9 degrees. So instead of 40 to 70, I'll relax it by making it 30 to 70. So I'm relaxing it by 10 degrees, or I can also make it from 35 to 75 and then rerun the structure. So from this structure statistics, you can see here there are 3 violated angle distance restraints, 5 violated van der Waals restraints, and 2 violated angle restraints. So once you correct this and rerun, okay, then you again check. Now after the 5th run, now I'm again showing you the run number 13. So here again, if you see the target function, first you have to see the target function. It is reduced a little, but not very much. However, now if you see the constraints violated in 3 or more structures, now you cannot see any upper distance violations. Okay, there are still van der Waals violations, but you don't have to worry right now about that. You have to go and see now angle violations. Okay, now there are 3 violations. So you try to correct these, or check again if there is any mistake in your in predicting these angles. Try to relax them and again rerun. So when you rerun again, after a number of, you may again find some distance restraints, so again correct those. So you have to do an iterative structure calculation runs, and then finally, if you see run number 24 now, when you see the target function, it has drastically reduced. Okay, from 3 it has now come to 0.2, which means that it's a very good output, or your structure is good. It's the lowest low energy structure. And when you see the violations here, there are no violations at all. 0 violated distance restraints, 0 violated van der Waals. All the van der Waals restraints are gone now, and all the violations, angle violations, are also 0. Okay, and then you can see the RMSD here, 0.2. So this is a fairly good structure. Okay, so this is, and then once you get something like, if you're satisfied, if you're getting all this, then you can see, visualize your structure, that PDB file in the PyMod, you will be able to see the structure. So this is an ensemble of 10 structures, 10 lowest energy structures. Okay, so with each iteration in the structure gradually develops. Okay, so this is your initial structure after the first or second run, and then as you go on doing iterative structure calculation, you will get the final lowest energy structure. So that is the end of structure calculation. Okay, you have determined the structure, but whether the quality of your structure is good, you have to validate before you deposit. You should know that the quality of your structure is correct or good. So for that you need to check the stereochemical quality of the protein. You can use this protein structure validation suite program. Okay, this is the site for that. Online you can just deposit your PDB in this, and it will give you an output. So it checks the structure quality of your structure by doing a project, that is the Ramachandran plot analysis. I'm sure all of you must be knowing what you all must have studied what is a Ramachandran plot analysis. Okay, so for example, this is the Ramachandran plot analysis. So if you have favored regions here, it shows 55%. It means that 55% of your residues are in the favored region, that is in the red region. Additionally allowed region is 24%. That is 24% residues are in the additionally allowed, the yellow region. Generously allowed 11%. Okay, that is in the beige region. And disallowed region, there are almost 9%. So such type of a structure, if you get such type of a statistics, then this is not a good structure. It's not an acceptable structure. Okay, so when you rerun correction, do your corrections and all, and then again rerun, and when you check the validity, a good structure should have something like this. More than at least 85 to 90% of your residues should be in the favored region. Additionally allowed can be 4%, 5% or whatever. Generously allowed is 0.3% of your residues. Disallowed regions, we have 0%. RMSD is 0.3. So this is an acceptable structure. So now you have validated your structure, you are happy with the structure. So if you're happy with the structure, then you can go ahead and deposit the structure in your protein data bank. So you can deposit the structure in this on this site. So here you have to deposit the PDB, and simultaneously there is another site called BMRB where you can deposit all your chemical shift values. Okay, so that will be the end of your structure calculation. So in a nutshell, I would describe NMR structure determination in 5 simple steps. Not really simple though. Sample preparation, data acquisition, that is NMR experiment, performing the NMR experiments. Once you perform the NMR experiments, the most important step is the data analysis, because the structure, the quality of your structure will depend on the analysis, how you have analyzed your data, whether you have analyzed it correctly or no. So this, you have to spend a lot of time in analyzing the data. It is not an easy job. Okay. Once you do the analysis, then life becomes a little more simpler. It's all computational. So you go in for a simulated NLE for structure calculation, and then you get your final structure. So I think that's about it. Over to you, Meenal.
Yeah, thank you, Nutan ma'am. That was a quite informative presentation. We have some question lined up for you. What is the minimum amount of peptide required for NMR analysis?
Okay, so the concentration of the protein or peptide depends on a number of factors. For example, what type of machine you are using. If you are using a very high field magnet, and the type of probe, for example, if you're using a cryo probe which is very sensitive, then you will require very less amount of sample. But otherwise, in a normal room temperature probe, and say around 500 or 600 megahertz instrument, for a peptide, a small peptide, and if it is not a label, if you're using it at natural abundance, then 1 millimolar peptide, as I said even in my slide, should be sufficient. But if you have a doubly labeled compound, if your if your protein is doubly labeled, if it is labeled with carbon 13 and N15, you would require a very less amount, say even 100 micromolar sample will be required. But again, yes, the concentration, if you have less concentration, you will need to spend more time on data acquisition. And if you have high concentration, you can reduce on your time that is required for performing your NMR experiment. So you can do it with 100 micromolar sample with in a cryo probe, you will get a very good spectra. But if you don't have a cryo probe facility, and you have a natural abundance, then you will require a more concentrated sample. So for a peptide, 1 millimolar should be a decent decent concentration.
Okay. Next question: what are the buffers and their concentrations that can be used so it won't cause any hindrance?
Okay, so generally proteins, peptides and all are taken either in water, that is 90% water and 10% D2O, or if you want to use the buffer, yes, we generally use phosphate buffer, say around 20 millimolar should be sufficient, but the pH also is important. So when you do a structure calculation and you are using a buffer, or you should see that your pH is less than 7, so that there are no exchangeable protons. You don't lose information from exchangeable protons.
Okay. Last question. What for structural elucidation using NMR, what kind of contaminations interfere the most with the analysis?
Like as I said before, for NMR and for structure determination, you need to have a pure sample. No contaminants are allowed actually. Yes, any type of contaminants. For if they are contaminants, they are contaminants. Whether there's nothing called good or bad, so there shouldn't be any contaminants. Then only you will be able to assign your structure correctly. Because if you have a mixture, even if you have one more compound, 2 compounds, then you'll have peaks from both the compounds, and then you will not be able to assign the peaks. Or even if you assign, it will be something wrong. You will not get a correct structure. So always try to see that your sample is pure.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for answering our question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We have an upcoming webinar next week on application of paramagnetic relaxation enhancement, NMR-based methods for probing structure and dynamics in biomolecule. Registrations are open and the links are given on our website. Thank you so much, Dr. Nutan, for giving us your valuable time and delivering us the talk. A special thanks to Professor Anil Kotantrial for initiating the webinar series of the instruments housed at SAIF IIT Bombay. Thank you, Dr. Nutan Agadi, for all your kind support. I thank our IT team, Mrs. Nidhi Goyal and Mr. Jagdeep Singh, for their continuous technical support. Thank you all the participants for making this event successful. Stay safe and stay healthy. Have a nice day. Thank you.